Okay. Good evening. I'd like to welcome members to this meeting of the Strategic Overview and Scrutiny Committee and to members of the public who are listening in via the Teams webcast. We have a busy agenda for this evening's meeting, so firstly to practical matters. We are not expecting a test of the building's fire alarm, so if the alarm does sound, could attendees please exit the building via the nearest exit. The rallying point is the rear of the car park. I'd like to remind members of the committee to please raise their hand if they wish to speak and to ensure that their microphone is switched on when not addressing an item for the benefit of the webcast and the recording and switched off when not. I'll refer to the scrutiny officer from Democratic Services if I need to record a vote or for any procedural matters. Thank you. So moving first to apologies. Have we received any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies have been received from Councillor Heckles, Councillor Lambert and Councillor Payne. Thank you.
Record of the meeting. This is to confirm the minutes of the Strategic Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting held on the 6th of June 2024. Does anybody have any amendments they would like to make to the minutes? No. I would like to make a very minor amendment on page 9, where under the additional member, it should read Payne. So I will propose that amendment. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Stevenson. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Thank you, Councillor Carr.
Sorry, where?
It's there.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, you've got a couple more abstentions down this neck of the woods.
Sorry, gentlemen. Thank you. So actions arising, item 3, we had 4 actions arising from the last meeting. The first one related to the head of SEND, and the action was on myself. And the head of SEND and Inclusion and Learning confirmed that Rutland received less high needs block funding per child through the national funding formula because Rutland schools were not classed as being in a deprived area. And the request was that the Chair send a letter on behalf of the committee to our local MP and the Secretary of State for Education. Upon investigating this with Councillor Smith, there is further information that is coming to hand. So the Local Government Association has commissioned a report from Ipsos on the costs of SEND, and this is due in mid-July. And this will actually provide sufficient information for us to put together a proper letter. So the action continues for me, and Councillor Smith will come back to me in the course of the next couple of months once that report has been received. Is that okay? Then we come to action number 2. The scrutiny officer to check with the leader of the council and relevant officers if it would be permissible for a late supplementary report to be submitted to Cabinet on 10th September 2024 by the committee if it scrutinised the local council tax support review at its meeting on the 5th of September 2024.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that the leader has accepted that she will be happy for Cabinet to receive a late supplementary report from Scrutiny on the Council Tax Discretionary Fund and Support Scheme.
Thank you. Item 3, the Scrutiny Officer to establish if an actual delivery plan had been produced for the economic strategy before the committee decided if the matter should be scrutinised.
Thank you, Chair. Hayley McHugo, the Economic Development Manager, has confirmed that Rutland's economic strategy for 2024/2040 has been finalised and has been published on the Council's website. The Year 1 delivery plan is currently being drafted, and she is in the process of setting up a business reference group for Rutland businesses and stakeholders to engage, support and input on the development of a longer-term delivery plan.
Thank you. And the last one is I was to speak to the relevant portfolio holder, Councillor Wise, who is present with us this evening, to see what value could be added by the Strategic Overview and Scrutiny Committee if the matter of the updated waste policy, which we will consider later in this meeting, and the updated tree policy was scrutinised at the meeting on the 5th of September. With regard to the latter updated tree policy, following discussions with Councillor Wise, I think it was agreed between us that there was little value that scrutiny could actually add. It's essentially dealing with embedding legislative change in existing policy. That therefore brings us to item 5, declarations of interest. Does any member have any interest to be declared this evening? Nothing. Item 5, petitions, deputations and questions. Have we received any petitions, deputations or questions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, questions with notice from members. Have we received any questions with notice from members?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And item 7, notices of motion from members. Have we received any notices of motion from members?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 8, consideration of any matter referred to the committee in relation to the call-in of a decision. Have we received the call-in of a decision?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. And that brings us to item 9, review of the work plan. The Scrutiny Committee is responsible for determining its own work programme, so we must use the forward plan and the contracts register to carefully consider which items to scrutinise during 2024-25. Items must be prioritised to ensure that the scrutiny process adds value and drives improvement. We have received 2 proposal forms for items to be added to the committee's work plan or pending items list. Using the paper process detailed on the pending items list, the committee must agree which items should be added to this work plan. Firstly, we have the waste collection reform I'll try that again. The Waste Collection Reform Implications Proposal from Angie Cullerton, Head of Safe and Active Public Realm. Unfortunately, Angie is not able to attend tonight's meeting, so we've been joined by portfolio holder Councillor Wise. Councillor Wise, would you like to introduce the proposal?
I actually don't have the proposal in front of me, foolishly, because I originally thought Angie was going to be here.
Can I let you have that?
I suspect that she has summarised the very steep amount of work we have to do very quickly for our waste collection. Some of those were summarised in the recent member briefing. In short, we have to introduce the food waste collection for starting April 26. We have, alongside that, got supposedly new burdens funding from the government to fund new trucks and bins and equipment and the resourcing of the changes. We don't at the moment know how much that money is going to be. It's unlikely to be enough. Alongside that, we have the extended producer responsibility, which is the responsibility on people selling goods in this country to make sure their packaging is recyclable and reduce it as far as possible. And they will be charged and that money given to local authorities. We don't yet know how much, and we don't know the proportion of that we will get. We will have our payment reduced if we're not efficient and effective, but they haven't yet told us their criteria for efficiency or effectiveness. So we don't know if we're efficient or effective as yet. Further into the future, we have the prospect of having to pay to have our residual waste disposed of relative to the amount of carbon that it will produce. It is in our interest to reduce our residual waste as far as possible. Taking all of these into account, we need to design our waste service for the next 4 years and going into the future. There are so many unknowns, and there must be so many areas that could be looked at. For example, do we reduce the size of the residual waste bins to encourage people to do more recycling and actually use the food waste? Do we reduce the frequency of collection? And which of those is going to be easier to explain to our public?
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? And before I open it up, could I ask Councillor Stevenson perhaps to give a brief update on some study work that was done previously by a firm of consultants? If you could just summarise that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, because the points that you've just made, Councillor-wise, in terms of those key questions, you know, reducing the capacity of the black bin, can we do this, can we do that? Now, noting the uncertainty and the unknowns, in 2021, we had consultants called Resource Futures. So all of the things that you've said have been looked at in great detail, and there was a report. So I would definitely be keen to know that the officer now in charge of that has got access to that and has read it. The other thing that we did, including workshops with residents, was a really thorough survey, which I think was conducted in May, June 2021. We had papers at Scrutiny in September 21, and reading that piece of work, the only things that popped into my head reading that paper, the DEFRA announcements October 2023, what's changed between 2023 and 2021. Our population, I'm assuming, will have got bigger since 2021. However, the rest of it, I thought, oh, crikey, that feels as though we're redoing a heck of a lot of work that was already done. So my question, or my assurance seeking, if you will, is what is different from the work that was already done in preparation? Because, as I say, all those things you've mentioned were gone into huge detail in 2021, and I'd hate to see more time and council resource used to repeat the same piece of work.
Councillor Wise?
I can assure you that the officer does have access to that. There are some changes since that report, and obviously we need to make sure we're reacting to up-to-date opinions. That's 3 years ago. We were just coming out of lockdown. They are noticing some differences in people's behaviour. For example, the amount of packaging that is used now, because during lockdown we moved from a country that went shopping to one that sits at home and has it delivered. And so there are some changes to what's being found in bins.
Sorry, Chair, can I come back on that? The survey was done in 2021, which was after the lockdowns in 2020. So that change had already been noted then, and I'm not being awkward. It's just that I think there definitely are things to revisit, but this paper at the moment feels like a redoing what has already been done.
So can I perhaps ask a question? Given the point that you made that the officers are familiar with these reports, and I believe there are two, and I've only looked at large reports. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Is it appropriate to use that as a base for complementary or incremental additional research, or are we talking about a clean sheet start? Is that what officers are proposing?
I think they would be quite happy to use that as a start to look at whether anything has changed, whether attitudes have changed, and so on. I think I don't know that anybody is suggesting we start from scratch all over again.
I've just extracted one page there, which I thought was quite instructive in terms of a ranking in terms of the preferences that was set out in that report. So, are there any further questions before we move on from members? Councillor Powell.
Thank you. And again, I don't know if the portfolio holder can answer this because it's probably a bit more detailed. I wasn't clear from this paper. It said that we've obviously got a certain amount of evidence. There's a bit more research required, and that scrutiny was required. Cabinet is looking at on the 8th of October. So two things really. What do you want the committee to achieve? Identify key areas for an education campaign, make recommendations to areas of change, consider options and cost implications. But there wasn't anything about any ways of achieving that. And also, is the idea to do it before the 8th of October? I'm not clear what the recommendation was that scrutiny would actually do. I suppose it's for us to scope up the scope of it, but are we expected to do it by the 8th of October?
I believe that is the deadline. That's correct.
Yes, I think key decisions will need to be made in that October Cabinet meeting, so any information would need to be produced to a very tight time schedule. Hence why I don't think we can go right back to scratch. I think it is an updating that we're looking at.
And
I'm just noting, obviously not opening the Christmas present early of the flooding report, noting there are various bits we've not been able to include because it has not been through officers. I would suggest that there is literally not enough time for us to do that, and I'm not sure what expertise we're bringing on options and cost implications because we are not qualified waste managers.
right, an entirely reasonable observation. Councillor Carr, did you have your? Oh. Yes. Councillor Edwards.
It was just a general question of we need to find this information. Who is it that gets that information? Is that the portfolio holder? So the research required. So the things like, as you say, we're not waste managers. So I don't know at the moment whether incinerating or anaerobically digesting it or whatever is best, or whether it's better to tell people not to waste food or to make waste less food. I mean, who is doing that research? Who is it? Sorry, basically. Sorry, waffle.
Councillor Wise.
I think this has been brought to scrutiny because it's about what scrutiny could add to the discussion. I mean, I think you're right that there is a huge education process going on, because I'm sure everybody that throws food away thinks they don't waste a lot of food, but on average, an average household wastes £630 of food a year. There are a lot of houses that can't afford to waste £630 worth of food. And how can, that is one aspect of the research that scrutiny may like to look at, is how do we approach the education so that people are ready for that food waste bin, perhaps don't have a lot to put in it, for example, and understand how to reduce food waste.
Councillor Edwards.
Just to follow up on that, is we've had it before. Rutland is a very divided economically, so there will be people who can afford that food waste and who are currently angry because they only get a bin taken once every 2 weeks. So they're campaigning for, we want a bin every week, and they would be very, very angry if they only got a small bin. But I agree totally with your words that there are some people who can't be affording that waste, and it would possibly put in their mind that, oh, this is how much we're wasting if the bin was smaller.
Councillor Carr.
So is part of the proposal then is to bring the community with us on the journey rather than us make the decision on how we should be spreading the word or educating. Aren't we supposed to be working alongside, not doing to, doing with? Because maybe that sells the message better than that. So I'm just trying to understand the mechanism of that, because I know online consultation is not particularly beneficial always, and you don't normally get too much back. So I'm just wondering where our role is, or who's responsible or accountable for formulating, for coordinating all of that, because that requires October is, well, we're midway through July. We've got summer holidays coming up. We're then back into September, then it's October. So I'm just wondering how do we do that in such a very short space of time?
Would you like to answer that?
I think if Scrutiny decide to look at the communications strategy, which a lot of it is about education, I don't think you would need the finite detail by October. The communications strategy is being staged up to the start of the food waste bin in April 26. We're not going to change everybody's eating and waste habits that quickly. So a piece of work that would come a little bit further down the line but would better inform the communications strategy. I mean, for example, they're thinking of working with the food banks and the community larders to help people understand how to better use some of the food that's available.
Can I just add one comment? We've got the research that Councillor Stevenson has brought to bear by way of background information. We now have over 15 million households, that was as of last year, who are actually engaged in this scheme. I think how I would summarise this, if we were to actually look at the public engagement policy, I suppose there is a good reference out there in the sense that there are many millions who have actually gone before us. As a reference. Sorry, that was an observation. Was it Councillor Stevenson or was it Councillor Powell? I beg your pardon. Was it Councillor Powell?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just two suggestions I was going to make. I think in terms of that long-term education campaign, that could be something that Scrutiny could be involved in. But I would say I think we need to be very clear, having been involved in sort of, if you're talking about changes to people's behaviours, that's a lot deeper than an education. We're talking about nudging, we're talking about penalties, and I agree with the Chair that actually Scrutiny could probably do a useful bit of work looking at what other authorities do, whether it's had any effect. We might be talking fines, we might be talking incentives, we might be talking technology on the bins, all that sort of thing. We're not going to change sorry, that sounds very negative. We're not going to change what people do with their waste by just telling them to do things. It's got to go deeper than that. So I'd have thought as a longer term thing, that's probably what Scrutiny could usefully do in the time scale between now and whenever that communications, it's not just communications, it's change of behaviour. The other thing I wonder is Scrutiny in the short period of time, we've got the current waste strategy, we've got the recommendations from last time, whether we could just review those as they stand and put forward some suggestions or comments on what we think needs to be updated, what needs to be revisited, or what is no longer relevant. And I thought we could do that if we've all had the papers, we could do that in a meeting and make some recommendations.
I think that's a very sensible suggestion. Just one further observation, which I think we touched on when we met with regard to the communication strategy. We've had the recent, and picking up on the point that Councillor Powell has made, we've had the recent unfortunate experience around the communication around the changes to primary care, and what it proves to us is that it needs to be executed well in advance of any implemented change, and it will continue for significantly longer. Again, picking up on Councillor Powell's point, that we actually expect to actually bring about behavioural change, which is Yeah, I agree with that. Councillor Stevenson, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Councillor Powell suggested is very sensible, because I think being realistic, there is a financial window within which to deliver the waste services. Obviously, one of the unknowns, which doesn't seem to have changed one dot, is actually how much money is going to be given, and will that be sufficient? I suspect the prediction that there will be a shortfall is not a wild suggestion. So in terms of the paper in front of us now, I don't think that's ready to approve, because I think that there are, or at least I'm not convinced that there's been a sort of, and this isn't, sorry, that sounded very negative to you, Councillor Wise, not intended to be. I think it needs to go away, and for us to informally say, right, where is the value added here? And I think there's a deeper piece of work about how we fundamentally engage and get that engagement from our residents. This is particularly pertinent, obviously, because it's going to save money from the respect of paying for the exactly. But I think at the moment this isn't ready to approve and put on the work programme, but I do think we need to revisit that engagement piece, and possibly after October, because I'm not convinced that we will add value before an October meeting.
Can I just provide one other bit of information, if I may? There is currently a case being brought by, I'm not sure which local authority, about the implementation date, which also has relevance to this discussion, and that may mean that there may be some deferral. So I should have possibly mentioned that earlier. I think there are probably two, as Councillor Powell rightly summarised. I think there are two areas that we can look at: the current waste strategy and how that might actually be improved, and the public communications exercise. I agree, however, with Councillor Stevenson about the document as currently presented, and I think possibly there is some useful work that could be done to actually focus the document in terms of specifically what the ask is of scrutiny, and I think that is something that can usefully be done. Councillor Powell.
I'll just suggest, bearing in mind the timescale, that could we not, I agree that this paper needs probably to just be reworked a bit, but could we not have on the agenda to review the current waste strategy at a meeting before October?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Have it at the meeting, and we review and then make any recommendations to Cabinet at that point before they discuss it.
I think, I wonder in terms of time, because I think we're actually pushing one or two things possibly into September.
Sorry, sorry, Chair, can I just?
No,
I thought we were looking
please.
at the current, are we saying we're looking at the one that's going to Cabinet, or are we looking at the current one which is being updated? Can you just clarify that?
Sorry, do you mean the policy or the strategy?
Sorry, what is Cabinet going to be looking at?
The strategy.
And is Cabinet expecting a revised strategy for October, or is it looking at revisions to the current one?
The current waste policy, which was going to go to Cabinet, only has minor changes, so that will be treated in the same way as the tree policy. The new waste strategy, which has to take account of the food waste and all of these changes going forward, will be going to Cabinet in October.
If I may, Chair. Okay, so for clarification, we're saying that if Scrutiny wanted to look at and comment on that revised strategy, we won't have it until a week before the cabinet meeting, possibly.
I haven't got in front of me the date when it goes to the joint leadership team. At the date it goes to the joint leadership team is the date that it would be available to come to strategy.
Right. I think the inevitable conclusion from that is we need to actually understand when that might actually be available. Oh. I think if you can possibly come back to us, Christine, we'll move on, and as your machine warms up, I'm sure something will come through the ether. So could we move on? We'll come back to the waste collection reform. Next, we have the highways proposal, which I have submitted. Can I clarify this document, because it changed between my submission and its inclusion in these papers? The timing and availability of Fix My Streets has changed from what was previously indicated to me, and you'll see that it is likely to only become available after this committee has run its life, so the end of March 2025. I remain of the view that it would be best to consider the aspects of road maintenance, which I originally suggested dealing with as a separate work programme item, separate from Fix My. I believe that they should be considered together. And I say that because I believe that there is an interrelationship in terms of safety, as well as in terms of road maintenance and also customer service. And therefore, I believe that the two should be looked at in tandem. But in terms of timing, it will extend beyond this committee's timescale, and therefore it's simply a question of whether this is something that we should even consider at this meeting. I'll open it up to questions.
I would suggest that we roll it forward to the suggestion for next year's work plan.
I think I agree with that. Unless there are any, sorry, Councillor Stevenson.
Sorry, just thinking as well, what we're actually possibly thinking about is the overall inspection regime, because actually these things are tend to be revenue budget rather than the capital maintenance programme. So in terms of the ad hoc fixing of the highway that would come through a Fix My Street report, which is the revenue budget, there is the inspection regime, I think, would be the key thing to look at, because that in effect should pick up defects on our highways network, before residents are in a position whereby they have to report it on Fix My Street. So I think it's a really important piece of work. I agree with both you and Councillor Powell about moving it to the next year, but I think specifically potholes, I think there is room to discuss whether or not it should be our inspection regime, because that is causing the chafe between resident expectation and pressure on Fix My Street. But if we all understand the inspection regime, it would lighten the load.
Thank you. That's a most helpful comment. Could I just add to that? I picked up on the suggestion from Councillor Edwards at the March meeting that there was also an issue around white lining around junctions, and there's a safety issue with that. So that this was to an endeavour to try to wrap all of these issues together. Right. So I will propose that we will add this to the Scrutiny Committee's pending items list at a date after the end of March. And do I have a seconder for that proposal? Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. All those in favour? Thank you. I believe that's unanimous. Could we now quickly return to the waste policy? And could I ask Councillor Wise if you'd like to update us on as to timing?
As members will realise, it's a multi-layered decision, but the final decision on the whole thing isn't taken at Cabinet on October. There is a paper going to Cabinet on October about the food waste and infrastructure proposals.
It's the food waste options and municipal waste management strategy review.
And the paper for that is going to JLT on the 3rd of September. You have a scrutiny committee on the 5th. So you could, I believe, ask to see the JLT paper and comment on that.
Right. So thank you for that. So the proposal is that as a phase one, and there's further work to be done on any phase two, that we consider reviewing that at the 5th of September meeting. So could I propose that to the meeting? Yep. All those in favour?
No, need a seconder.
Sorry, seconder.
No, I wanted to just
Yes,
clarify
please.
something. When you say JLT, are you on about the leaders meeting? What's JLT? Because there's three of us here who's don't know what that means.
JLT is the joint leadership team. It is the directors, the chief exec, cabinet, and whichever officers are required to be present for that particular item. So if we're talking about waste, Angie Cullerton would be there. If we're talking about buildings, Andrew Gordon would be there.
I can also just like to point out it is not a public meeting. It is an internal meeting.
Thank you. So the proposal is that we considered that at our September meeting, and I require a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. All those in favour for that to be included? Thank you. Could I just clarify then regarding the second part of this, the public communications element of this? When is that likely to become available? Have we any idea, or would you like to come back to us with a time on that, perhaps for the September meeting?
I think it would be valuable to come back to you at the September meeting. What I'd like to do is ask Matt Wake, the communications, what plans they already have in place, the timings of those, so it can better fit in. I'm sure he'll be delighted to know he's getting some help with it. Right.
Well, thank you for that. So we'll carry that forward as as an item to be brought before the committee in September. Thank you, Councillor Wise. Now, so just before closing then on item 9, the review of the work plan, I just wanted to highlight that it's some time since Scrutiny have reviewed police and crime services, and so the Vice Chair and I are intending to meet with our Community Safety Officer to establish current issues and will report at our next meeting. Thank you, and I would like to draw this item to a close. And that brings us to item 10, the contract register for 24-25. We have a discussion regarding the Council's contract register. You have an A3 copy before you. The register is publicly available online, but Councillor Powell did circulate to members a summary of the contracts that will be coming up for review in the next year. And as I said, hard copies of this are available for members to view now. Councillor Powell, could I ask you to say something about this item?
Thank you, Chair. It was really this, all this information is available publicly, and my proposal was that actually Scrutiny brings this into a sort of a normal work programme. When we're setting our work programme from the year, we ought to have a review of the contract register. This particular summary is filtered by ones over, I think it was over 500,000, and one's due for review in the next couple of years, so we could set the parameters. And as you'll see on here, I think there is a review of the waste contract. The transport comes up in a, in a few years, but we need to be looking at these things ahead of the game. And maybe I would suggest that we pick one other contract to look at before it comes up for review, to just see what that's all about. And so, yeah, I would suggest that we maybe can bring it in the first meeting of scrutiny of the year when we're doing the plan, that we have a review of the contracts register and see if there's any other items on there that we actually want to scrutinise, which should tie in with the forward plan and other things that we're looking at, but does give us a bit of a heads up in advance as to what's coming along the line. So I'm not proposing anything specific from this particular list, but I think it's something that all councillors should be looking at, and add it to our annual programme of meetings so that we can take it into account when looking at items to scrutinise.
Thank you for that. Before I open up to questions, I thought it was interesting in terms of how it actually brings to our attention themes, residential care being one that's prominent on the list. Are there any questions? Councillor Edwards.
Not a question, but just wanted to confirm that's a really good idea. Because, again, coming into this new, or even if you're not, if you've been here a few years, when you look at the dates on these contracts, you wouldn't have a clue that that was ongoing and was about to finish or something. So that, I think, is an absolutely super idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just ask,
sorry, Councillor,
through the chair, and it might be something that we can just check out with the commissioning manager. They've got contract start and end dates. They've also got a review date. Could we just have further clarification exactly what that means? I'm assuming it's the first step that we're reviewing things. Some are reviewed quite early after the contract's awarded. Maybe just a bit more clarification to members what that is, so that we know the point at which it's useful for scrutiny.
No, I think that's a good
actually
idea.
Go in there. I was really looking at the start and end dates. Yeah, thanks.
So clarification of the review date. Councillor Carr.
Yeah, just to add to that, some have more detail around the extension options, but some don't. So, for example, the Rutland Care Village, it's got contractual extension option, but actually doesn't say what that is. So I agree. I think we do need to be looking at the ones that are coming towards the end of their contract, but also we don't want to probably focus on the ones that perhaps will be extended, because we'll want to see the ones that have got the priority where they could be re-procured.
I will actually seek to get further information. I think the one thing I would point out that there are aspects of any contract that are commercially confidential, and this is a public document, and therefore one would expect that there may be items that are not in the public domain. But I take the point that you've made.
Can I just come back on that?
Yeah,
and
yes.
That's fine. I haven't got a problem with that. But then maybe we do need some additional information that isn't public facing. What I don't want us to do is focus on contracts that are okay, everybody's okay with them, and have got the extension option, and they will be rolled on with no issues. It's the ones that potentially are coming to an end. We know that there's an awful lot of work that goes on to re-procure. So, I do agree that there will be some commercially sensitive information in there, but maybe for us to inform what we do, where we can add value, there's no point in us looking at everything, because we're not going to add value to everything.
Are there, Councillor Powell?
I was just going to suggest that maybe before the end of this scrutiny year, we invite the contracts, head of contracts, to come in and do just a short presentation about how this register works, and some sort of thoughts about what we as scrutiny could get out of it. Just did like a 10-minute presentation.
Yes.
I think all members would find that useful.
I think that's very useful.
So then we can use that and to think about how we use this to inform the work of scrutiny.
No, I agree with that. Yes, we'll take that as an action, Councillor Powell. Thank you. Are there any other isn't it?
That's what the committee needs.
I will take. It's for the committee to agree, but I'm offering to arrange that for March, for the March meeting, if that's agreeable to everybody. Yes, thank you. Can I just make another point just on the register? I think it will highlight important areas of policy change, and the topics, as we've already said, may also provide opportunity for public engagement on any such policy change that may arise out of this review pace, of this review process. So, based upon this discussion, this is a topic I think that we should carry forward, as Councillor Powell has indicated, and I would like to propose the following for your consideration. That the contracts register will be listed on future agendas moving forward as part of the review of the work plan. So my suggestion is that it's actually included on at each meeting of the committee, rather than simply at the beginning of the municipal year. That's my proposal. The link.
Not copies of it.
No, the link. The link. Sorry, I saved the planet. Thank you for that. That's a dry sense. I'm very old-fashioned. The link will be listed on all future the forward plan. So that's what the proposal is for consideration, rather than doing it at the beginning of the municipal year. And do I have a seconder for that proposal?
Sorry, I'm not seconding it. Can I say something? My suggestion was that at the first meeting of the year, following having had an update from the previous meeting, that we actually reviewed it and decided if any of those contracts that we've already agreed how we filter them down are ones that we want to put on the work plan, which is different to having a link every. So we actually have it as an item on the agenda on the first meeting of the year to review it according to what we've considered we would filter it and how we're analysing it, to see if there's anything in that contracts register that we want to review during the year. And we only have to do that once at the beginning of the year as we set the programme.
I think that's very sensible. Sorry, did I switch that off? Sorry. I think that's a very sensible proposal, Councillor Powell, and I'd be happy to second it. Would you care to repeat it for the sake of the record?
Okay, my proposal is that at the first meeting of the scrutiny year, that we put on the agenda a review of the contracts register. And prior to that, we will have discussed an analysis of it, so we've got the parameters. And from that review, we will propose whether there are any items or contracts on it that we want to include in our work plan for the year.
Thank you.
I probably could phrase it better if I thought about it a bit more.
I'm sure my colleague to my left will phrase it suitably. So I would be pleased to second that proposal. All those in favour? Thank you. I believe that's unanimous. Sorry, slippery hands. That brings us to item 11, group and panel updates. Housing Association Evidence Panel. First, we have a brief update from the clerk.
Thank you, Chair. Following the last month's meeting, a housing association's evidence panel was determined as the best route. A draft scoping document is in the process of being pulled together. I met with the relevant officers this morning, and the updated draft has been sent to Councillor Powell for her to action moving forward. And I'll hand over to Councillor Powell.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as we said, we agreed we'd go forward with this, and I suggest that we bring the scope back to the next meeting for finalisation. Is that possible? Right, okay. So I know Jane sent me an email, but I have had a full day of being occupied on other business, not council businesses. So if I can hand back to the clerk to make the suggestions, that will probably be helpful.
Yeah, what we can do is, if Councillor Powell is happy to nominate herself as the chair of the Housing Association's evidence panel, and then that can be seconded, and then the committee can vote and agree that, and then from there, Councillor Powell can then email other councillors requesting volunteers to be part of the evidence panel, and from that we can then finalise the draft scoping document, pull that together, and then bring it back to either the September or October Scrutiny Committee meeting for its final approval.
Excellent. So, Councillor Powell, I would be pleased to not nominate you for the role of chair. Would you be willing to?
I would be prepared to be chair of that, as I made the original proposal. I would like it to come to the October meeting. I think we need to complete the flooding evidence panel before we embark on another evidence panel.
I'm entirely in agreement with that. So the proposal is that Councillor Powell chairs the evidence panel in respect of housing associations. All those in favour? Oh, a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Keeping me on side. All those in favour? Thank you. Are there any further questions on this matter before we close? No? Thank you. So that brings us to item B, the flooding evidence panel. And so we have here the initial report from the flooding evidence panel for the committee to comment on. Members need to be aware that this report does not yet include the work done by the panel's internal group, who met with officers to review the council's policies and procedures. We are currently awaiting for officers' comments, but the final report from the flooding evidence panel, which will be reviewed at the next scrutiny committee in September, will include the internal group's report and the final recommendations. Councillor Stevens, would you like to introduce the report?
With great pleasure. Thank you, Chair. Just to note, and for the public record, this was tabled for June, but monitoring officer advice was that with being in a period of purdah with the general election, it would be inappropriate to consider this report should, heaven forbid, it would sway voters. So that's why we're seeing it now. As the Chair has commented, we've got the initial report. We have done recommendations and there is extensive work from the internal group, but I do understand that officers would want to review that because, again, we wouldn't want to set hairs running in the public domain when this is a very sensitive issue. So there are a couple of things that obviously I would welcome comments and questions about. That obviously is the report as it stands. Any questions about that? And or indeed any comments. But what I would note with it, it is very much based in evidence. So there isn't anything in this report that members of the panel have sort of plucked from air or used as personal comment. It is all based on the evidence that we have gathered both from residents, from our surveys, from the external organisations and of course from our own teams within Rutland County Council. And I think at this point it's very, very important to thank everybody for their time and effort. We had a huge public response. The individual councillors who volunteered for this did so knowing it was going to be very detailed, very tight timelines, and everybody hit those deadlines really, really well. We appreciate that officers obviously have other things to run at the same time, and those deadlines are challenging, which leads me on to the second point. The reason this wasn't a task and finish group, the reason that it was an evidence panel, was because the urgency to get clear, specific actions in place across the county before the autumn was really, really important. Obviously, with our delays and this not coming till September, I am concerned of the chair of this panel that those actions that need to be taking place as soon as possible, there is a risk of delay to that. And I'm very grateful that the portfolio holder is here because hopefully she can give us some reassurance regarding the Section 19, which I'm assuming is underway, the appointment of the flood officer, to which we know a budget was approved, and also crucially the winter maintenance programme, if flooding is being included in that preparation, because I know it's around this time of year we start worrying about grit and the salt barn and that sort of thing. So one, any questions or comments on this report, and then secondly, an opportunity just to explore how we're going to make sure that our residents, the county, are best prepared for, I fear, more rain in the autumn. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stevenson. Before we go back to Councillor Wise, could I ask if there are any other questions from members? Councillor Carr.
Apologies, I have read it and maybe it's just me and it's just the way we get reports, really. I understand the summary of findings, but was it deliberate not to be very explicit around recommendations?
so that the recommendations are explicit. They are currently with officers and they will be at the report in September. And Councillor Carr, yes, quite, I agree. But the recommendations are very explicit. What we didn't want to do is set hairs running in the public domain, noting that we are mere humble councillors and not paid professionals.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from other councillors? No. Councillor Wise, would you like to respond to the questions from Councillor Stevenson?
The Section 19 process is multifaceted. An important part of that is to make sure that we have a robust specification for the report. We are hoping to have that specification completed by the end of this month, and therefore we can then go out to appoint consultant company to carry out that work.
And the flooding officer, how is he or she coming along in terms of status?
I believe no, I'll be guessing. I wouldn't like to say where we are in the HR process.
You will come back to the committee.
I will come back to the committee and let
Thank
you know
you.
where we are in the
Thank
HR
you for that,
process, because
Councillor
I
Wise.
don't want to give the wrong information.
Councillor Carr.
Just want to come back on the recommendations. Who's going to be responsible or accountable for implementing the recommendations? And then which body is then going to be reviewing and ensuring that those recommendations are being covered?
Slip into colloquialism, bang on the money there, Councillor Carr. Part of reviewing the recommendations with the officers is crucially to identify when, what, how, who, and also should there be any further financial implications. And I'm not unwrapping the Christmas present early, and I'm keeping my eye on the officer here. There are elements of accountability and coordination of response that one presumes that the specification of the flooding officer will have picked up. However, what we absolutely want to make sure that anything that is recommended is deliverable, it is financially possible. In terms of the keeping a check on it, so the monitoring and evaluating, I think we had discussed that Scrutiny should keep tabs on that as we are the originators. But yes, very good point, Councillor Carr. Thank you.
Okay, just by way of closing the questions, I sent some really points of clarification to Councillor Stevenson, and for the record then I'll just read these out. With regard to the issue of coordination, where you rightly refer to community on page 9, to the absence of emergency response plans and flood wardens, there are actually 2 points, I believe, here rather than just the one. Parish councils have a role in feeding back concerns around the adequacy of maintenance practices to RCC as a responsible authority, but in the event of an extreme weather event, that requires a response plan, which many parish councils did not have, and a single point of contact in the form of a flood warden to coordinate that response. In point 2.6, maintenance, an example is given of, by implication, absence of adequate dredging of streams. And there are a number of problems with this, giving this particular example as a solution. Dredging typically moves the flooding problem downstream and increases silting. And we know from the internal group that officers do not always that officers' reporting of these matters is not always clear. And from the second point, I would suggest that for many of these incidents, natural flood management measures, that is upstream, would be the most effective form of mitigation, and possibly the cheapest solution is deepening of the channel. Thank you. So that was that.
Do you want me to come back on that, Chair?
Yes.
So obviously your comments in terms of natural flood management versus dredging, and I know that you've done a lot of research into this. This is part of the officers' sense checking things as well, that we get that qualified professional input to say the dredging one is a very interesting one because there are very mixed opinions on that. And presumably in the process and when it goes to cabinet and obviously to the portfolio holder, there is a point where presumably we will need to weigh up as an authority which way we're heading on that, because there are cost implications whichever way you do that, and also the Environment Agency and where that sits into it. But I would hope, or I would expect, that sort of expert officer input just to sort of iron out any discrepancies, because certainly we want to be factually accurate. We want this to be a document that's sort of professional, respected, and most of all, acted upon.
Thank you. That was a very, very good clarification, and thank you for that. Are there any further questions? Yes.
Yeah, just a small question. Is on the questionnaire, is 408 responses usual, or is that an unusual? Doesn't seem to be very many people that have responded to that.
Councillor Stevens.
So I believe it was 126 that responded to the overall council budget, to give you a context. Now, you may want to, I'm just looking, am I right on that?
I would need to
Can we double check?
I would need to double check that, but as far as I know, the response we received to the survey on flooding was very well responded to.
Yeah, so it's, yeah, it's but it almost comes back to the previous point about how do we engage and have engagement, because, you know, 41,000 population, and we're really pleased with just over 400 responses. So, yeah, answers on a postcard.
This was sent out, wasn't it, to householders, wasn't it? Wasn't that how it was done? No?
No, the survey was done online, though hard copies were available in the local libraries for those people that didn't have IT access.
Councillor Powell.
It's probably also worth pointing out that the survey did go out to parish councils.
Yeah.
So they were actually responding, and I don't know what the percentage of them who responded, but they were responding on behalf of their residents and the issues in their area. So that adds to the reach, I think, and the evidence that we've gathered.
And I think also that the community work group also had specific meetings with a number of community parties as well. I think that I'm correct in saying that.
And also, actually, can I just poop the trumpets of our fellow councillors, because I know an awful lot of the members shared those surveys across their social media. So it was a real, you know, a team effort. But I certainly think that engagement and getting people engaged is still an ongoing issue, not just for Rutland, but for any local authority.
Councillor, is that okay? Councillor Wyatt.
I think it was yourself, Chair, that raised the issue of resilience plans within parish councils. It is to be noted a very large number of our parish councils don't have emergency plans, and that is certainly a piece of work I want to get onto over the summer. Aside from flooding, there are a number of other emergencies that can hit parishes. We could have power cuts with vulnerable people needing essential equipment. How does a parish respond to that? A major traffic accident, how does a parish respond? And we have an officer in post who can help parishes construct those. So I think that's a piece of work we need to do before we worry about, well, before we have moved on with the flooding one. I think we can start with that straight away.
Yep. Councillor Edwards.
Following on from that is one of the huge things that came out in all of our stuff was about communication. And if you read the testimonies at the end, it's the bits where the 4x4 guys are saying, I got to a place, but there was no risk of life, so I couldn't do anything. And then I got a call saying I've got to go here, and then there was an ambulance, and I couldn't. And all of it came down to communication. So I think a communication person to pass on these things, whether it's a road traffic accident or rather than just hearing it on social media, you know, next door tells you that, oh, watch out, this road's flooded and you can't get past. That would be, I think, a really helpful thing. But anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Councillor Stevenson.
Oh, and sorry, there was just one question not answered by the portfolio holder. Thank you for covering section 19 and the flood officer. I had a third question, which was about the review of the basic winter maintenance programme around, obviously, the gritting, ordering salt, etc. Has flooding now been included within that as part of the sort of preparedness of the county for the winter months?
I can't answer that question at the moment. Can I come back to you at the next meeting?
And Chair, can I thank the portfolio holder for just being very honest and down the line about things?
Thank you. Unless there are any other questions, then I think I'll draw this item to a close. That brings us then to item 12, any urgent business. I've not been made aware of any urgent business for consideration. Jane, have we been notified of any urgent business?
No urgent business has been received, Chair.
Thank you. I beg your pardon. The date of the next meeting. The next meeting will be held on Thursday, the 5th of September 2024 at 7 p.m. in the Council Chamber. I declare the meeting closed at 13 minutes past 8.